Tune in to the Pure Rock Show, Tuesday nights at 7, Wednesday nights at 5, and Sunday nights at 5 to hear a real variety of rock music featuring deep cuts from well-known artists, songs from great bands that never reached mainstream success, and former staples of rock radio that you just don't hear on today's tightly formatted commercial stations. Spanning the worlds of classic rock, hard rock, metal, punk, and alternative, you're sure to discover something new or songs you haven't heard in years. Local concert information, interviews, and the closing cover song of the night are all part of this jam-packed hour of pure rock on KPPQ LP Ventura, Tuesday nights at 7, Wednesday nights at 5, and Sunday nights at 5. So, you were the drummer from Electric Angels, Atlantic recording artist, Electric Angels.
Atlantic recording artist, yeah.
And that came out in, what, 90, 91?
February 1990.
Okay. In terms of the Electric Angels, what is your number one memory when you think back to that existence of that band? What sticks out in your head?
Well, Electric Angels was a band that was formed in L.A. in 1988, and we spent a year in L.A., and we just decided to move to the East Coast because nothing was happening for us in L.A., so I became a New Yorker inadvertently because of a move with my band, and I ended up staying there for nearly 20 years.
Which is really interesting to hear because, especially in that time, every band from America is going to L.A. to try to make it.
Exactly.
Which I thought was interesting, and I'm like, going to New York, and I was in New York at that time, and there weren't too many bands coming out of New York, like, Skid Row maybe, and a few East Coast bands, but I mean, L.A. was definitely the place.
Well, it did get us noticed kind of fast because everybody said, like, why'd you come here? You're come from L.A.? Like, why'd you come back? You went the wrong way. But it did get us noticed, and we got some attention pretty quickly from it. So I'd say it worked in our favor.
Yeah, you know what? I could see that because, again, I was there in the scene, and I wasn't meeting bands from L.A. that hadn't already made it in New York. So without further ado, I'm going to play, I don't know if it was your biggest song, but I think it made the biggest impact, at least on the East Coast. For those of you that remember, this is a trip down memory lane, and for those of you that never heard it, you're in for a treat. It's a great song. It stands up today. Would you like to announce it?
This is the last song on our album called The Drinking Song, and I would caution any guys to use this line on your lady.
This is the Pure Rock Show on 104.1 FM, KPPQ LP Ventura. I'm Mark Levitt, and I'm here with my special guest, John Schubert, playing drums on that last song we just heard, the Electric Angels, and The Drinking Song. And again, that to me was the biggest song. Do you think that did better than Rattlesnake Kisses that you had the video for, or was Rattlesnake Kisses bigger?
Well, it's funny because The Drinking Song was never really a targeted release. It's, we put out Rattlesnake Kisses. We had a video. Christina Applegate was in it. We got a little bit of play on MTV. But college radio stations just started playing The Drinking Song.
Yep.
And one station in New Jersey out of Seton Hall played it a lot. In fact, at one time in the summer of 1990, I know we had just gotten back to New York from tour, and, they informed us, hey, you are the number one song on our show right now. So we went out there and did a little hello and everything like that. It was great. Kids just loved it.
That's where I was at the time at my college radio station, which was not as big a station as SOU. But I listened to SOU and a station called WDHA, which is a big rock station, and they played that song as much as any current Motley Crue's or Rats or whoever else was big at the time. So in my head, in my little world, you guys made it. Again, I was, a young guy not knowing what made it was, and you figured any band on a major label, all these guys must be millionaires and they're set for life. But as we've all known, as we've matured, it doesn't always work out that way. Things take twists and turns.
No, you'd be surprised.
So let's start talking about the band you were in before Electric Angels, because this is a really interesting story. And I wasn't familiar with this band, but I'm sure people in Southern California and other places were. They were called Candy. So why don't you start there with who was in that band and what they were all about, and, kind of what was going on, because you guys were based in L.A. at the time, right in the mid-'80s when, the Sunset Strip scene was, at full blast. So
right.
Tell us about Candy.
The band Candy was 4 people. 2 of us came from Berkeley up near San Francisco. 1 came from Cleveland. I was the only native Angelino. I met the bass player. His name was Jonathan Daniel. In February of 1981, a friend of mine just answered an ad in this newspaper called The Recycler, which is kind of like a print version of what Craigslist is now. Every band put their ads in there. So we just answered an ad, guitarist and drummer, needed for bassist and singer. So we went up to Hollywood. We met Jonathan and this singer named Richard, who looked exactly like Aladdin Sane David Bowie with fire engine red hair and great clothes. And we just went into a little rehearsal studio. Jonathan played a few songs he'd written. And I was just kind of knocked out. I'm like, they're so mature and they're so from a point of view that a 19-year-old shouldn't have.
I was only 19 years old.
Yeah,
wow.
and I was 21 at the time, and I'm just thinking like you wrote these, and they're short. They're 3 minutes. The perfect pop song. They're 3 minutes, but they were kind of melancholy. And so I'm like going, this guy's good. He's got talent, and I'm just gonna hitch myself onto his boat. So we went through a couple little permutations. The band that we put together was only lasted about 6 weeks, and then it kind of fell apart. Did one gig, and Jonathan and I continued on. We found over the summer of 1981, we found a guitar player and a singer. Singer came down from Berkeley. His name was Kyle Vincent, and he was Jonathan's high school friend. And Jonathan said, I got a great singer. He likes Barry Manilow, but he's
Yikes.
a great singer. And then we heard him sing, and going, this guy's got a David Cassidy voice,
Wow. Yeah, David Cassidy and Barry Manilow. Interesting twist there for a rock band.
David Cassidy I can deal with because I grew up with the Partridge Family, so I understand that. Barry, okay. Anyway, the guitar player we had was this little 16-year-old kid from high school, and he lasted about 6 months. We're playing a club in early 1982 in Santa Monica, and backstage is Kim Fowley. Now, if anybody saw the movie The Runaways, and you saw the actor that played Kim Fowley, he just nailed Kim.
Yeah.
I was watching that movie going, oh my God, he just got Kim perfect. I thought that was actually a really good movie. It really showed you the kind of the, cheap side of rock and roll.
It was entertaining. I love those movies, but I always wonder, how authentic is it? But it's nice to hear it was
that
pretty
one
close.
got it right.
Cool.
Spinal Tap, that got it right. The rest of them are all fantasy. But the Runaways, they're all riding around in a station wagon and staying in the same room in a motel. That's the way it is.
Yep.
So we meet Kim backstage, and Jonathan's a smart guy because he knew who Kim was right away. He just walks up and goes, "You're Kim Fowley." And Kim Fowley was like, "So who are you and what are you doing?" And Jonathan knows how to sell. Well, we're kind of like the Ramones and the Raspberries, messy pop songs.
Yep.
And he's like, I'm intrigued. And then we played our gig that night. We went to a deli in L.A. called Cantor's, and we sat there from 10 o'clock at night until 7 the next morning telling Kim everything about our band. And the next thing we know, he's given us money to do demo tapes. He brings us over to his place and says, play me every single song you have ever written.
Wow.
And we were there for like 12 hours.
Wow.
So he worked us. And a month later, we played a gig at the Troubadour in L.A. He gave us his Rolodex. We called everybody on his Rolodex, and there was a line going down the block.
Were you opening for any bigger band then? It was
Nope.
just you?
It was Sunday night at the Troubadour. It was just like nothing night. And we had a line going to the Troubadour's like going, who are these guys?
Yeah.
And we're kind of like going, who are all these people? Because we don't know them. We'd only been a band for 4 months, But Kim kind of like, he always knew how to work a hustle. He was kind of like a used car salesman, but he knew how to get interest. Even if you still needed to deliver, he could conjure up interest. So then people start coming to see us. Oh, I don't know who this band is, but they have a lot of people. And the next thing we know, we're playing the Whiskey A Go-Go. We're playing the Troubadour on the weekends. We did shows with Great White. We did shows with Black and Blue. We did shows with a whole bunch of people. So we're doing weekends because back then you kind of had to prove yourself and work your way up to a weekend.
Were you doing the flyers on the poles?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, the Sunset Strip was covered in paper, and some of it was ours. So we worked our way up, and by the summer of '82, our little 16-year-old guitar player had to go his way, and we got this guy that we had tried out the previous summer, but for some reason we didn't choose him. His name was Gilby Clark from Cleveland. So, Gilby was knocking around L.A. just like us, but he looked great. He played a Les Paul out of a little amp, but it just sounded incredible, and Gilby was just the B12 shot that our band needed. Everything that happened after he got in the band just started firing on all pistons.
Was he writing with you too, writing songs for your album?
Kind of like Jonathan would come in with a real simple idea and Gilby would sort of flesh it out.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we did our songs. But by the summer, we were headlining the Whiskey, headlining the Troubadour, headlining Madame Wong's out in Santa Monica. I mean, everything just started clicking.
So what year was this?
This is 82. And by the summer of 82, Kim had made some more demos with us for songs that would eventually wind up on our album.
And was he shopping you to the labels at this
He
point?
was. In fact, he got Clive Davis of Arista to come down to see us at SIR.
Wow.
Way too early for us. I mean, we just shouldn't have done something like that. And Clive was there. He sat with his guys. He watched us play our songs. We did like 20 minutes or something like that. And famously, he got up, shook our hands, and said, "Boys, you're 3 minutes away from greatness." It's a record company, I'm out of here compliment. Because basically, you are one great song away from being spectacular, but I don't hear it. The 3-minute pop song, you are 3 minutes away from greatness. So when you come up with that great 3 minutes, you let me know. And then he was out of there, and we never heard from him again.
Okay.
So it was, how many bands can say they auditioned for Clive Davis and he came down? He
Exactly.
did. But there you go.
So fast forward to when you got signed.
Yeah. So about early 1984, we came to the notice of somebody from Mercury Records, the A&R guy who signed Bon Jovi. And he contacted a manager in New York who managed Kiss at the time. And that guy came to see us. His name was Howard Marks. And before we know it, we are signed to Howard Marks' management company. We have a guy from Mercury Records looking at us. And by the end of 1984, we had a record deal.
And was Kim Fowley still with you at that point?
No.
Okay. That's usually the way it goes, right?
Well,
they deliver you to someone and...
Yeah, that's Kim's kind of whole history. But we did one thing that Kim remembered for decades. He died a couple of years ago, but he still remembered the fact that when you guys got signed, we gave him $5,000, which is basically most of our band's advance. We gave it to him because, A, he did all this work for us. He paid for all these demo tapes. He really got us. He really taught us a lot. So we gave him what we could, and he said, I had Guns N' Roses once, I had Poison, I had Motley Crue, I had all of them, and none of them. As soon as something came along, they forgot who I was.
Wow, I didn't realize he was involved with all those bands too. You don't hear about that.
Kim was on to everybody
Wow.
before anybody got to them.
Unbelievable.
Everybody in L.A., all the bands from the early '80s, Kim was there before anybody else, but he always got left in the dust. So we gave him what we could. And we dedicated our album to him.
That's really, really nice. So you get signed to Mercury Records, and the album comes out. And what was the initial response of that record?
Here's where it all hits the fan.
That soon, huh?
Well, we recorded it from December till February into '85, about 3 months, down in Miami at Criteria Studios. Our producer was Jimmy Einer, who did all the Raspberries records, Grand Funk. He did Dirty Dancing. He did all this stuff. So we're like, okay, we got the Raspberries producer doing us.
Which is huge. I mean, Dirty Dancing had
Dirty Dancing was right after us,
but he was still a pretty big producer.
Yeah, we're going, okay, there's our producer getting an Academy Award for Best Soundtrack or whatever like that, but he couldn't do anything for us. So we made an album that just got a little weighed down. We should have done it in 3 weeks. Instead, we did it in 3 months. So by the time we're doing vocals and everything, we're like, I don't even remember these backing tracks. This is months ago. So it didn't feel very fresh.
And just to let the audience know, the band Candy wasn't really anything like Electric Angels. I would describe them as like a power pop band.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like a mixture of the Cars and the Raspberries.
Right.
Kind of like the Skinny Ties.
Well, we love the Raspberries, and we love the energy of the Ramones. So everybody used to write us up as Ramones Raspberries pop, something like that. So we were a pop band. We weren't ashamed of it.
Yeah.
L.A. was all pop in the early 80s. So we went to Miami for 3 months, and we came back to L.A., and we're like, okay, everybody's on a motorcycle. Everybody's tattooed. Who are all these new bands, and what happened to the power pop? It was kind of dead.
Yep.
And we were gone when they buried it. And now we come back to this tattooed motorcycle LA, and we're
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, I think we're yesterday's news. So the record came out in August of '85.
Right.
The week our record came out, our A&R guy got fired.
Oh, God. So that tells the story right there.
And in the music business, nobody at a label is going to pick up another guy's artist.
Exactly.
So they threw it against the wall to see if it sticks, and it didn't.
So you didn't really get any type of promotion out of them?
Not really.
I mean, I know you did some pretty, major tours for the time,
Yeah,
right?
we got on the road with Rick Springfield, which was incredible. I mean,
he was huge at the time, right?
He was huge.
Mm-hmm.
We went out on the road and we toured the entire country with Corey Hart, who was on his second album.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing great theaters all across the country, like 2,000 seat theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids were just going nuts, mostly for him. But when we came on, you got a bunch of 14-year-old girls and you got four guys with long, black, messy hair opening up. Instantly, they're in love with us. So the only problem was anywhere they went to look for our record, it wasn't there.
So they weren't even distributing it properly.
No,
You
it's
couldn't
like,
find it in the stores.
Here we are in town. Okay, we're not on the marquee, and you can't find
Unbelievable.
our album, but we'll give you a half an hour worth of music.
just
Yeah, and it's kind of like by late '85, the band was little bit at our wits' end, and it just sort of sputtered and collapsed, and the singer left and went solo.
And did you just have a one-album deal with them? Because aren't they usually multi-album deals?
All bands basically, they hook you in for 7 records. If your first one goes triple platinum, they go, great, we have a gold mine on our hands. So yeah, they signed us for 7 albums, but the option to renew was always theirs.
Gotcha.
So when the first album underperforms, they just kind of go bye.
Yeah, you can
because
you can
they
leave.
can.
And you didn't make a video with that band, I imagine.
We made a video.
Actually, you did. That's
for
right.
the title song called "Whatever Happened to Fun."
Correct. I did
And
see that.
it's a great video. It's it's on YouTube. It's fun. We're cavorting around Hollywood Boulevard, running down the sidewalk like the Beatles at the beginning of A Hard Day's Night. It was a fun video, and it got a little bit of airplay. And we're on the road opening up for Rick Springfield, Corey Hart, and nobody can find our record in town.
Was it one of those deals? Because you always hear about, the labels, let's make a video, but then it's all recoupable against the album sales. But I guess if the album sales aren't there.
You pay for everything.
So did you owe them money when you left?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Terrible.
The album and the video probably total was $250,000.
So how does that work? Like, do you have debt
I'm glad
collectors
you
after
asked.
you? I mean,
well, here's what happens, and this is why the music business is the most bizarre model of anything out there. If anybody's going to do a movie, let's say you get hired to do a movie, you get paid to do the movie. They don't go, well, let's see how it does at the box office this week.
Guarantees.
Records, the record company is basically a loan agency. They loan you the money to make a record, and then when you start selling records, you pay it back. And once you pay them back all the money they fronted you, then you start making money. But we never made anywhere near enough money to pay back $250,000.
Wow, crazy.
So you're in this hole that you almost just can't get out of. It's like sharecropping, What happened when the singer left? Kyle, he went solo, and Gilby took over vocals, and then we needed another guitar player. So we found, once again, LA, just everybody's there.
Sure.
We found a 19-year-old guy named Ryan Roxy, also from the Bay Area, and Ryan came in, great guitar player. Gilby sang. We did that sort of second version of Candy for about a year and a half.
Oh, you did? So
And
you did
then
give
we
it another
realized,
effort.
yeah.
Okay.
And then we realized, okay, you're old milk. You can't. It's you're nobody wants to touch.
And this is probably going to lead into Electric Angels,
Yeah.
but my question is, did you have the same image and the same type of music during that year and a half? Were you trying to keep that going?
It's pretty much the same. Just Gilby's not the vocalist Kyle was, but we had actually that band was a lot more fun. We had a great time. We played all over the place, but you're trying to sell the same name with some new songs, and everybody kind of looks at your last album and they kind of go, "This one didn't do anything," and you don't know that you're in a death spiral, but you're in a death spiral.
So we're almost at the end of the Candy realm, but I'm curious, when you were out on those tours with Rick Springfield and Corey Hart, obviously L.A., those were your people, so if you played L.A., they were good shows. Are there any little pockets in
we never
towns here
got
and
to
there?
L.A. We never got to L.A. with either one of them.
Is that right?
No,
Wow.
we never got to L.A. with either of them. The closest we got was San Francisco.
Wow, which has nothing to do with L.A.
Which was the hometown for Jonathan, our bass player, and Kyle, our singer. So those shows were fantastic.
Okay.
And then we went up to Seattle and Portland, and our last show was in Portland. And after that, Kyle left.
So there were no little markets that popped up where someone actually did get a hold of the record and you had some good response?
You know what? Boston was really good.
Okay.
Boston was great.
There's always these regional things that I find interesting. Did a station get behind it? Do you know?
What's the big station up there?
It was WBCN was the
yeah,
rock
we were
station
trying
there?
to get BCN, but I think we might have been a little too pop. But they were, the crowd, the kids, they liked us there. And it's funny because same thing with the Angels. When we went to Boston, we were kings.
That was a big market for you.
Yeah,
huh?
it was great. Boston,
Wow.
I don't know what it is.
It's a college town.
Yeah,
From Spinal
yeah,
Tap.
yeah.
They didn't know it, but it is a college town. So with Candy, I did notice that Rock Candy Records, which is an amazing European label that does these awesome re-releases of a lot of underground albums that the major labels don't put out anymore, or they take them and they just do great releases of new bios and some bonus tracks, whatever, that they re-released this in 2012, I think for the first time on CD, because Mercury never released it on CD,
Never
right?
got on CD, no.
So just real quick, because I'm always curious about the business of these things too. How did that come about, and was that lucrative for you? Was that good?
Rock Candy Records must have gotten in touch with Jonathan in New York. I know that they do a lot of re-releases. Actually, they did the Angels first.
Oh, okay.
And then they said, well, let's do Candy too. So, it was great. They remastered them. We had input. They sent us like emails with all these questions, and we kind of responded, and then they threaded it into a story. So there's a great little booklet in both Candy and the Angels.
Yeah, Rock Candy is known for that.
Yeah, they did a great job. And, it's for me, my 25-year-old album is back in print. And my Candy album, which was, now 32 years old, is back in print. I'm, all my little babies are alive again. So I'm great. And that's the first time in CD. So it was never, it was only vinyl and cassette. But, here they are all this time later, and nice package. And
so you guys get some decent royalties from that?
never saw a penny.
So how does that, who's getting paid for that?
I imagine that when they license it off, Candy from Mercury Polygram Records and Electric Angels from Atlantic, there must be some sort of fee involved. Like, any money generated has to go back to the labels. We never saw a dime.
But I guess the publishing rights, whoever wrote the songs, they're getting some royalties, unless they sold them off to the record company
I don't
too.
think he got those either.
Wow, that's interesting. I always assumed like Rock Candy, like the musicians would love them because it's another breath of life, and they might make a couple bucks off
But
it.
you know what? I don't care. I really just don't care. I'm just happy they're in print. I mean, I know that sounds maybe sort of disingenuous, but I'm just happy they're in print. For me, that's the end of it, because I made my peace with all of this a really long time ago. As long as it's out there and people can find it, I'm happy. I don't care about.
It's a good
making
attitude.
money
I'm
off it.
just from a fan, you would want the musicians to see something from their work. But like you said, I'm sure there was a deal that was signed to the record company.
Something
so.
between Rock Candy and the other labels.
The good thing is, though, like you said, the artists are always involved. So.
But what we did in Candy about 10 years ago was we actually just sort of like this Electric Angels thing. We just self-produced a CD with all our demos on it, and we printed it up ourselves. We did everything ourselves, and we put it out there. So it's got the Kim Fowley demos on it. We put it out ourselves. We sold 5,000 copies, and we all made money.
Oh, that's incredible. That's probably equal to 50,000 if a label was involved or more.
Yeah. So the one thing we did ourselves, we made money.
Wow.
And maybe I bought myself a new cymbal or something. I don't know.
So let's do this. A transition from Candy to Electric Angels.
Sure.
My first question is, I know there are a lot of the same members, but the image, total 180. You went from, the power pop to, I liken the Electric Angels to the time, early 90s. There are a lot of bands with this look, kind of like the Biker. LA Guns kind of look like you. A lot of different bands kind of had that look. And the music was hard rock blues music. I wouldn't call it metal. It definitely wasn't pop. But there are a lot of bands doing that at the time. Salty Dog, Tora Tora. Dozens of them. Badlands, which I love with Jake E. Lee. And you guys were part of that. So was that a conscious, like, okay, we want this image, or did it happen naturally? How do you get from Candy to the Electric Angels?
With Gilby still fronting Candy, we got to November of 1987, almost 2 years after our first singer left. And we just decided, okay, you know what, it's time to put this to bed. It's funny because I still remember the exact same day. It was July of 87. Guns N' Roses' Appetite came out the same day as the Faster Pussycat CD. And we listened to them both side by side, and we're like, okay.
That's what's happening.
Clearly there's a winner here. And we just sort of saw the writing on the wall. You can't sell Candy again. So we finished up our last show at the Roxy on Sunset. Kyle came back. We sort of had a farewell show. We put the old girl to rest. Kyle sang a few songs, and Gilby went his own way and started a band called Kill for Thrills. And Jonathan and I and our guitar player Ryan found this singer from Nashville, Shane, and we just started rehearsing some of Jonathan's new songs. Some of them which were old Candy songs that never got recorded. So we just brought Shane in and started doing it, and a month later, both Gilby's new band and the Electric Angels made their debut on New Year's Eve 87 at a club called the Central, which is now the Viper Room on Sunset Boulevard. So we both debuted our brand new bands the same night, New Year's Eve, at Ricky Rackman's party. And and then we would play all of 1988 in Los Angeles, just everything we could. We opened up for Iggy Pop. We opened up for Zodiac Mind Warp. We opened up for The Damned. We opened up for everybody. And we didn't really try to tailor our image. We just sort of kind of like just started looking different. You can't wear, velvet jackets all the time. So we just started wearing leather and growing our hair long and not shaving every day and all that kind of stuff. And just, we weren't trying to look like all the biker bands. That was their own thing. We were still sort of pop, but a little more blues-based.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do this now. We're going to play, I believe it was probably the only single released, Rattlesnake Kisses from the album.
Yeah.
And that was the video that starred Christina Applegate. And just that fact, you would think it would have gotten some good play in MTVs, because you did not see many big celebrities, and she was pretty big at the time. That was married with children, was at the top of the ratings.
You know what? She saw us in L.A. one time. She just said, "I kind of like you guys." And when we asked her, "Will you be in our video?" she said, "Sure." And she flew to New York on her own dime.
Wow.
Put herself up in a hotel. She showed up, did her thing, and we're like, that was nice. I mean, we didn't pay her. We just we just asked, and she said, "Yeah, sure."
Incredible.
So she's cavorting around, sort of dancing around the video to the singer.
That's all right. Look at the Warrant videos with Bobby Brown. Christina Applegate was actually a famous person then.
She was great.
So great video, and this is a single that total, had the hooks. I could totally have seen this been a big single, and I'm going to play it for you now on the Pure Rock Show, KPPQLP Ventura. We're going to come back with John Schubert after the song and get into the meat of the Electric Angels' career. This is the Pure Rock Show on 104.1 FM, KPPQLP Ventura. I'm here with John Schubert, the drummer from the Electric Angels, and that was the Electric Angels just now with their single, Rattlesnake Kisses. And when this interview's over, go on YouTube and you will see Christina Applegate dancing to that song in their video.
Yeah. Like a black widow, you mate and kill. While we were making out, you were making out my will. Poetry, man.
Classic poetry, right? So we've gotten into the Electric Angels, and John was telling us about the big-time producers on his Candy album, and this one, even bigger, Tony Visconti, who produced David Bowie and T-Rex. How the heck did you get hooked up with him as a brand new band?
It's sort of funny because going back to Candy, the A&R guy that got fired when our record came out, he came around again. Now he was managing bands, so he actually decided, I really love you guys. I want to help you with the Electric. So we're like, all right. So he knew May Pang, who was Tony's wife at the time, and May Pang, famously for Beatle people. She's the girl that John Lennon ran off to L.A. with in '74. When his year away from Yoko, he went to L.A. with May Pang. So May Pang's married to Tony. Our manager, Jerry Jaffe, knows May Pang. May puts him in touch with Tony, who's in New York. And Tony comes to see us, I think maybe at that Roadhouse gig I gave you.
Oh, yeah?
And he likes us. So, all right, let's talk. And when we make a few demos, he likes what he hears. He wants to find a new band and just, start from scratch. And so this is middle of 89. We had relocated to New York in early 1989.
Was Tony producing other, baby bands
He
at
had
the time?
just done The Alarm.
Okay.
Before we met him.
Okay.
And I mean, in the early 70s, he did all the T-Rex records. He did Bowie up until Ziggy Stardust, and then he stepped away from Bowie for a little while, did T-Rex, did Thin Lizzy. I mean, so
fantastic. I mean, at the time, you guys must have been like, wow, this is terrific.
So Tony was the New Yorker who went to London in the swinging 60s and just became the producer du jour, and so we hook up with him, and we make some demos. He takes us back to London at the end of '89 for a month, and we are in his studio called Good Earth. And he said, I'm selling the studio, and I'm pulling up my stakes in London after 20 years, and I'm going back to New York. So we were the last band to record in his studio. And we were there. We did the record in a month, 3 weeks maybe. Yeah.
So at that point, the record company they're footing all the upfront bills for this. They're paying all this stuff.
Yeah. We're going into the same old mire again. But hey, it's new. It's a new label. It's a new band. So we don't have to worry about the previous.
And the record company, they were all for this. They weren't like, oh, we don't want to put this money out. They were like, go for it.
You know what the guy, our A&R guy said? Tony Visconti, what's he done lately?
Oh God.
I get it, but it's kind of like, what? The man did Rebel. Okay,
exactly.
Can you just, turn on your classic rock. You hear Tony all the time.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, he gave us that line. So with a lot less money, we went to London, did the album real quick, and came back to New York to mix it. And it was, this is like November. It was out within like 2 months.
Which is amazing. And actually, I'm sorry, I want to backtrack because you spoke about this before, and I read it in the liner notes of your new release, Lost in the Atlantic, which is a great title, playing on the Atlantic Records.
That's right.
Came out this year on Demon Doll Records. Yeah. And I did read in your extensive liner notes, this can almost be like a book / CD, which is fantastic, that move from L.A. to New York. Just talk briefly as to why you made that move, because it's kind of counterintuitive from the early 90s. You'd think bands wanted to go to L.A., and you guys had a base in L.A., yet you came to New York and made it work. So how did that happen?
Really, from the band's inception, I mean, like I said, the first gig was a New Year's Eve of '87. We spent all of 1988 playing everywhere in LA we could. We did like 50, 60 shows that year, everywhere we could. And we opened up for some pretty big bands. So I'd like to say one of the highlights of my, whatever you want to call it, career, we opened up for Iggy Pop at the Fillmore in San Francisco. So I love Iggy. Great venue, historic venue, and I'm kind of like, okay, this band's only 6 months old and we're opening up for Iggy. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But around the end of the year, we had made tapes for everybody. We had showcased for every label. Everybody's like going, no. And we just kind of like said, you know what? We made a pact. If we don't have a deal by the end of the year, we're going to New York.
And did you have these same songs that made it to the album at the time?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's something that nobody picked up on, because I'm telling you, and I'm not just saying this, because I heard every release at that time. I was working in radio, and I got serviced by every label, and this was definitely one of the more quality albums. I mean, there was a lot of garbage coming out then, and it just seemed like labels were signing anyone that had the look and just throwing it out there. And
yeah, they were, except us.
Except you, for some unknown reason, and it's just how things work.
Most of the songs that made it onto the album, we had already done them in L.A. We made a demo tape with Bruce Kulick, who at the time was the guitar player for Kiss. But nothing. So we made this pact. If we don't have a deal, we're going to New York. And come the end of 1988, no deal, pack up the van, and we drove our way across the country, played about 10 shows across the country, and we landed in New York in February of '89.
And did you have a connection in New York or somewhere where you thought you might get a little traction? Like, just what the heck? L.A. doesn't work? Let's go to New York, the next city.
It was just kind of like, an L.A. band in New York, and some people might think, okay, well, let's just put them on and see what happens. But for some reason, it just started to work. I think it's because the songs were sort of born out of the frustration of living in L.A. L.A.'s a city that you either love it or you hate it. And at the time, we hated it.
Yep.
And the songs are all frustrating. They're all about life going downhill. And for some reason, that works really good in New York. So it's it's a hard city to live in, and the songs just seem to echo perfectly.
That's true. I mean, a lot of the LA bands, there was The Flash, Good Times, Makeup, and Life's a Party.
We were never that. We were never. A lot of bands were, but we were never that. Most of our songs, if you look at them, are there's something wrong with the person singing it.
Right.
Everything's going wrong. It's not Poison. Let's have a good time kind of thing. It's just
exactly. So you get signed, you make the album in London with Visconti, you make a video with a high-profile actress, and then what happens? What's your first major tour you get on?
So 2 months after the record came out, we went out on a 4-month tour, opening up for another New York band, Danger Danger, who was getting great airplay at the time. A lot of MTV, a lot of radio, and we were playing clubs across the country with them, and it was great. Good crowds.
And your album was in the stores. You didn't have problems with distribution this
it
time?
It started to be kind of the same thing. You know, it's hard. You know, there's 2 copies at the record store, and and it's just here we go again. Same thing from Candy 5 years later. We come to town, nobody's done any advance work, and there's just nothing to find. And the kids would tell us, they go, I can't find your album. I'm going, oh, I know.
And let me just tell you how crazy that is, because you were on 2 of the major labels, Mercury Records and then Atlantic. Like, these labels knew what they were doing.
The Led Zeppelin label,
Not only Led Zeppelin, but Atlantic in the early 90s had so many hard rock and metal bands. I mean, Kix. I mean, Ace Frehley, who you toured with, was on
We opened up for
Atlantic.
both of them, Yeah, Atlantic knew how to put the machine in motion.
They did.
They just weren't doing it for us.
And actually, one of the stories you told, I was cracking up, and I was actually going to play a little joke on you and play a few opening riffs from a band to see what it did to you, but I didn't. So why don't you just tell us the Electric Boys story?
Oh, yeah. So
another Atlantic band, too.
we're in Florida. There's a day off between shows, and a record store down there says, will you guys come in and do an in-store? Mm-hmm. And we're like, sure. So we made a phone call from our motel room to Atlantic. Can you overnight some posters to this record store so we can have something to sign? Because we know there's not going to be enough records. Mm-hmm. So a big ream of Electric Boys posters, who was also on the label, shows up, and we're like, there you go. Even they don't know who we are,
Was this like one of, I'm sure you had many, but this had to be a Spinal Tap moment for you.
That's pretty Spinal. And then the in-store was really dry because there was nothing there. We're just signing like, napkins or something. I mean, it was just like, really, people?
It's unreal. So everybody out there that wanted to be a rock star, or, like me, was into all this music at the time, and you looked at these guys, what a great time they're having. They're in major labels. Everything's great. It wasn't always what it appeared to be.
Well, we're having a good time. When you sit back and you say to yourself, you know what? I'm on the road with my band promoting my record. That's great. But that's, the next day, you have to remind yourself again, okay, it's all good. It's all going to work out. But you're starting to see these little signs that something's not going to work out here. And I don't want to say I'm a pessimist, because a lot of this is really all based on faith. I mean, I just decamped LA and moved to New York City because my band was going there. You got to have faith. So we're always working on faith, but you can start to see when this isn't going to work out.
And, again, from my perspective, I was there in the Northeast, and the Electric Angels got played as much as any big band. So from my perspective, they made it. I mean, yeah, they were a new band, but I'm like, they're getting all this radio play. They must be selling probably, at least 500,000 albums, maybe not platinum, maybe it went gold. I mean, how many albums did that record sell?
I'm really not sure. It did okay in Japan. Candy did okay in Japan. Angels, I don't know, maybe 50, 75,000.
Is that right?
I don't even know the numbers.
And
Atlantic is doing the accounting because they're trying to get paid back. So we really never saw any numbers.
Wow.
I have no idea what it sold.
Unbelievable. And
I had to buy my own copy. I mean, it was kind of like
right?
that. Yeah, well, I went to the record store the day it was released. I said, I'm going to buy my own copy. I still got it sealed.
Wow. At least they had a copy for you.
Tower Records in the Village.
Oh, wow.
But, again, I have friends in L.A. that never got to make a record. So
Sure.
I'm still kind of like, they might go, come on, don't complain, man. You made 2 major label albums. I'm like, I know.
And that a lot of people know you.
So I
enjoyed
recognize
it. Yeah.
that. So
yeah.
it's like, again, I got to do things other people didn't. I got music that, it's my legacy for whatever it's worth. But I have friends that never got to get there. So
Sure.
So yeah, it's something.
So a couple other things. Number one, I asked this question. It's probably, you hear it all the time, or at least you did. But, I always like to know, where did the name of the band come from? Where did Electric Angels come from?
Oh, Electric Angels. Well, going back to Candy, right when Gilby got into the band, Kim Fowley said to us, write 10 new songs by the weekend. So Jonathan and the rest of us wrote a lot of songs, and one of them was called Electric Angels. And it was just about a guy who's running around town with his gang called the Electric Angels, so we just sort of repurposed it.
Which is interesting, because, again, at the time, I saw every release that came out, and between the Electric Boys, I can't think of what other electric bands, but then Angels, you had the Little Angels, that one. So
Comstat Angels.
You know about more than I do. Yeah. So, again, it just, everything fit in. You guys had the look. It all, it seemed like it was going. So I know you did some successful tours. The album, first album might not have sold 1 million copies, but other than New York, New Jersey, did you have any other areas that
for the Angels
you were doing well in?
we used to go up and play Boston a lot at this
Okay.
club that was right over the left field wall from Fenway Park on
wow.
Lansdowne Street.
Yeah.
It was called the Axis. Great club. The kids just packed it in. It was fantastic. I was like, I don't know what's happening in Boston. Maybe it's the dirty water, but Boston was great for us.
So, baby band, major label, on a major tour, doing well in New York, can't hurt in Boston. Why was there not a follow-up to that album?
By the time we got off the road in fall of 1990, Atlantic, once again, they sign you for 7 albums or whatever it is, and now they're kind of going, okay, re-sign, or let's do a second record, and we're kind of like going, it didn't really work the first time. So we actually just said no.
Really? Wow.
We just said, you could have proved it on the first album, but you didn't. You just let the whole thing fall apart. So we actually just walked away.
Wow.
And we could do that. We did. And, they didn't drop us. We walked away. We just didn't re-sign.
Which
so,
is pretty unique because, again, I follow a lot of these bands, even ones that had, pretty successful first albums, and they always come up with at least a second one. Yeah.
Well, we demoed a lot of songs, which is leading up into Lost in the Atlantic. We demoed songs all through 1990 and 1991. Tony Visconti, our producer, offered his time to help us out in the studio for a couple of days, so we got a couple of nice productions out of it. We shopped them around to some new labels, but you know what? And again, this is timing. Nirvana had come out, and once again, just like in Candy 5 years ago, you realize we're dead.
Yeah.
And he's like, we are not that, and that's all anybody wants right now. So we instantly, once again, knew that our expiration date had come, and you just can't sell this band a second time.
It's a shame because I do remember back then, and a lot of these bands did put out like a second album or third album around that time, and most of them flopped because the record companies weren't promoting them. I remember Warrant, for whatever reason, they put out an album, and I think I read an article that they went into Columbia, and the album was out, Dog Eat Dog, and they went in there, and as they were there, someone from the label was taking down their poster and putting up an Alice in Chains poster, and they said they never got one bit of help with that. And
yeah, I mean, just look at the two bands side by side. Nothing in common. One is the new Vanguard, and the other one is like, okay, you are the party boys or the down boys, and you're over. Your time has come and gone.
Exactly.
So we just still remember that. It's just kind of like, we're done.
And at that point, were you interested in doing another band, or were you kind of burnt out?
You know
and
what?
figured it wasn't going to happen?
At this point, it was right around this same time. We got word from L.A. that our old guitar player Gilby Clarke had been chosen to replace Izzy Stradlin in Guns N' Roses. He jumped in, and 10 days later they were on the road for Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, and Gilby was on the road for like 3 years.
In the biggest rock band in the world at that
I think
point.
the first gig he did with them was in Boston Garden, and then the next night he played Madison Square Garden. So we went down to Madison Square Garden to see Gilby, and he's kind of like, I'm so scared,
Wow.
And our guitar player Ryan was just thinking, I've put years into this band, and here we are at this stage where it's all falling apart. I think he looked at L.A. and said, everybody in L.A. is getting famous except us. So he went back to L.A.
Was he friends with the Guns N' Roses guys, or did he just audition?
Gilby was.
Gilby was.
Yeah,
he knew them already.
Gilby knew them. Gilby knew them. He knew Izzy a long time ago. So they knew him from around town. So Ryan went back to L.A. to look for the gold that he wasn't finding in New York. And eventually Ryan became the guitar player for Alice Cooper's band.
Wow, that's a great gig.
He's been touring with Alice Cooper for 15 years now, I think.
He's still with him now?
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. Alice Cooper's doing a tour of Deep Purple right now.
So
it's great.
I saw them when they opened for Motley Crue here a couple of years ago when Motley Crue was at signing off. Alice did the whole world with them.
I remember that. That was their farewell tour.
Yeah, and it was 2 years, and Ryan went around the world with them every gig.
Wow.
With Alice. And so I saw them at their last gig down in at the Honda Center down in Orange County. And he said, this is the end of we've been on the road for 2 years, and so I'm going to take a break. So, he's been in Alice's band for a long time. So, great for him. It's good to see him. He's a fantastic guitar player, and he's the nicest guy to be around.
Nice.
Always smiling, always positive, just great guy. So
living the dream.
It was
right?
it was our loss. It was our loss.
So you have a new album that came out this year, The Electric Angels, called Lost in the Atlantic, and another one of these things. 25 years later, who would have thought an Electric Angels release, correct?
Well, once again, all these are all demos that we would have put onto a second album had there been one.
Mm-hmm.
And the last demos are from 1991. So
Mm-hmm.
over the years, the internet came along,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow all these demos got put onto YouTube and available.
Mm-hmm.
So the fans have been trading these songs for years.
Okay.
And Demon Doll Records contacted us and say, we'd like to get them all together, master them, polish them up a little bit, and then have you guys do all the graphics and the artwork, and we did.
They actually have one of my favorite bands on MCA that put out 2 amazing albums called Law and Order.
Oh, yeah.
Coincidentally enough, with a singer named Shane, which I thought was
We
hilarious.
did a show with them at the Roadhouse, too. But,
Did you really?
so these are all demos. Officially, they've never really been released, even though they've been bootlegged for years.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a really nice job cleaning them up. We did all the artwork, and I wrote the liner notes, and they put it out, and once again, no big label involved. I'm making money. So
That's great. That's
you
great. So
know.
this one you're getting paid from.
Yeah, I got paid
Unlike
on
the Rock Candy release. This one you're getting some money
yeah,
for.
I get some money. So
Good.
Put out a CD, do it yourself of demos, and you make money.
It's amazing. And it's a really nice package, I have to say. That
I
the
think
liner notes,
Yeah,
it really is like
it's
a book.
It's a great package.
John is a great writer, and you really feel like you're back in the time, and it's funny and it's informative if you're into this type of stuff and the scene. It's really cool. So it's
And
called-
it kind of actually put the band back in touch.
Mm-hmm.
We all started communicating on the phone and on email, and our singer Shane did all the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
This photographer who took the cover, John Scarpati, he lives in Virginia now. We contacted him. This picture's almost 30 years old, and you know what he just said? Like, yeah, go ahead and use it. So
Cool.
we got a fantastic picture to use as a cover.
So now that you're all in touch, and I read about
yeah.
other bands that I've liked, any chance to do a one-off show just for old time's sake in L.A.?
Well, Ryan has to do his Alice Cooper thing, and he lives in Sweden, so I don't know. Shane is in New York. Jonathan, who I was in 3 bands with, currently splits his time between New York and L.A., and Jonathan has a management company now called Crush, and he's got Fall Out Boy, Train, Lord,
Oh, wow.
Sia.
Oh, my goodness.
Jonathan's doing great because he
sure
was
is.
always a really smart guy. So,
Wow.
so he's doing great, and I'm a middle school teacher. So, yeah, if somebody wants to do something in the summer when I'm off from school, yeah, I'm all for it.
Their new album, Lost in the Atlantic. That's all demos and unreleased tracks that are out on Demon Doll Records. And a lot of interesting stuff, I guess, in different stages of final production. Some are more raw and finished than others.
A lot of them are very raw, and any band that does a new song, it kind of has to go through a process where you start to cut out this part, drop a little bit of lyrics, modify it a little bit. They never really got there. We just said, here's an idea, let's put it on tape. So some of the songs got a little more lived in and started to become what they really should have been. But a lot of these are just, here's the idea, the song's brand new, let's just put it on tape just so we remember what we're doing. Some of those songs we never played again. Never even did them live. It's funny because Jonathan was listening to a lot of hip-hop at the time, so he put all these things in. Again, if you ever saw, the New York movie Do the Right Thing or something like that, it's the guy with the boombox on his shoulder or something like that. So he's got all these artists in there, Kool Moe Dee, Public Enemy, and they were all brand new bands at the time. Now they're all in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Is
So,
that
it's,
hilarious?
but, again, this is 1991, so it's a long time.
So John Schubert of the Electric Angels and Candy has been our guest here on the Pure Rock Show. And one last thing we'll talk about was the band he did after the Electric Angels called the Loveless, which was in the mid-'90s, I guess.
Yeah, so
together, right?
after our guitar player went back to L.A., Ryan, we looked around for a replacement, but it's just, there isn't another Ryan. So we found a friend of ours who played guitar, and then we did again. So it's 3 of us from the Angels with a new guitar player, and we just sort of realized, we're all about 30 years old now, 31, and we just changed the focus of the band a little bit, called ourselves the Loveless, did about 24 gigs around New York with a lot of new songs. Actually, some of the Loveless songs are on this Electric Angels demo, Lost in the Atlantic. But this time, the band was just a little bit different. It wasn't quite as edgy as Electric Angels. It was just a little bit more about relationship loss. Life is, you grow up and you don't get everything you want. You get a little disillusioned. We played a lot of clubs around New York. We played Webster Hall. We played Don Hills.
Nice.
We decided to just self-finance and produce our own CD. So we spent a few months in the studio and put it out ourselves. And we sold them all out.
Wow.
So I think we might have done like 1,000, 2,000 copies. We sold them all. It's in a collector's item if you are into that stuff. It's a good CD. It's kind of our swan song because the band didn't last too long, and we all went our separate ways after this. But I think it's a good way to go out. I felt like the songs were mature. We couldn't have done these songs as younger people. We had to kind of live a little bit of life experience. So I think it's a very true album, and I'm pleased that we did it ourselves without any big record labels messing everything up. Some
Cool.
friends of ours shot a lot of footage of us in clubs at the time, and they edited it together, and they put it up on YouTube. So if you search the Loveless, the Return of the Ex-Girlfriend, you'll just see a bunch of footage of us in clubs and in the studio making the album, and a nice little job. They synced it up very nicely.
Cool. So there you have it, guys. You heard the story. This is behind the music of a couple real bands, signed to major labels, living the dream, playing with big bands, big producers, and that's the story. These are the bands I play a lot on this show. Great music on major labels, never made it for whatever reason, to the big time, but, it's great to still be turning people on to this music because, as far as I'm concerned, it's a lot better than a lot of the stuff that's been out the last 15, 20 years or so if you're into the hard rock type music. So, John, thank you so much for coming in. It's been great.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking about this old history.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's part of my life, and I'm proud of it, and we all have to move on a little bit. So it's part of my past, but it's nice to look back at it every now and then.
It's a cool, fun past to talk about, and have to thank our mutual good friend Alex for helping us hook up and get this together. Alex, you're awesome. Thank you very much. And
thanks, Guz.
I will be speaking to all of my listeners again next week here on 104.1 FM, KPPQ LP Ventura.